Hey everyone, how's it going? We're back, Devs in the Shed, for our weekly series where we do hands-on work with AWS services and IT projects and everything else that's of interest to us. My name's Matthew Coles, and we've got Paul Kukel here as well. We both work for Amazon Australia, and this week we are hoping to do a bit of a dive on macOS EC2. So we want to set up like an iOS build server. Last week we were going to do a bit on personalized, but we had a bit of an overlap in time, so we've pushed that session on personalized out to sometime in December. But really keen to go through macOS EC2. I guess, Paul, there was one other thing that you wanted to talk about before we get right into it, right? You were having a look at Babblefish, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Apologies everyone for the rain. So I'm in Melbourne and it just decided to rain. So you'll have to put up with that. I'm in a tin roof here. But yeah, welcome everybody. And anybody else in Melbourne getting that rain at the moment, or where's everybody from in the audience? Let us know. But yeah, there was one thing that I'd been following a little while, and that's Babblefish. And so Babblefish is an AWS or an Amazon-led project to build a set of drivers that enables you to interact with Postgres databases as if they were SQL Server databases. So if you've got some sort of legacy application that you want to move away from SQL Server, you want to move to Postgres, take some advantages of what Aurora or Postgres compatible Aurora database has. Migrating the databases, it can be hard. Like you have to actually, rebuild all of the schema on Postgres. There might be some specific changes. There might be something specific to the language that you're doing there. But Babblefish basically, like at a really high level, sort of sits in between and says, we'll take the connection as if it's a SQL Server connection, but we'll apply all of what you're doing on top of a Postgres database. And it works really well. I've been playing with it a little bit myself. I've spent a lot of time, a lot of my career actually working with SQL Server. I'm fairly comfortable with it. I'm fairly comfortable with the tools. But in the later periods of my career, we were starting to move away for the cost and the lack of licensing, and plus, especially with Aurora, some of the speed enhancements. So basically, you get that same performance of SQL Server, but a much lower cost point. So that one generally available last week, and I played around with that and I set that all up. But what I was going to do, and we might get through it, I'll sort of try and do it in the background. I just wanted to show what that sort of looks like. I don't have it set up for this specific VPN at the moment, so I can't connect into that database to show you. But it'd only be a couple of minute demo. But I thought that was really interesting, and especially for anybody looking to move away from lock-in licenses, it's an interesting project that people should have a look at.
Cool. Well, let's see if we have time, but let's jump into macOS EC2, maybe to start with. Now I'm going to screen hop a little bit, so hopefully everyone can bear with me. I am going to bring up my AWS console. So the disadvantage of having a widescreen monitor is 1080p video doesn't look too great, so I'll have to share everything individually. So here we go. So I'm in my AWS console. I guess the purpose of this is like, we've had a number of customers since macOS EC2 instances have come out, really keen to leverage the service to basically build things, directly with Mac instances in the cloud. Back before instances in the cloud were available, a lot of the customers were doing like bulk purchases of Mac Minis, and they were putting them under their desks. And those Mac Minis would be doing the builds. They might, if they had the luxury, put it into a little bit of a server room that they had in their offices, or they might rent some co-location space. But this isn't exactly ideal, and it's hard to manage like these devices in particular when they perform a very particular task, but they sit like away from the rest of the infrastructure. So pretty cool that last year we came out with this functionality. I've been having a play helping a bunch of customers within the region use the service, and they've wanted to tie their app builds to like CI/CD, and then effectively have all these commands run to test their apps. They're using Fastlane, which is a tool that allows you to like build an IPA mobile app format. Rewinding a little bit, let me know in the comments if I need to like dive deeper into a particular area. But this IPA file is like what you'd take and then you'd release to the App Store. So you'd push that out to Apple, and so Fastlane kind of helped you with that process as well. And it was all mostly command line driven, but there's a whole bunch of hiccups that happen in that process that you need to resolve when you're setting up a build server as well. So I thought I'd show that kind of stuff today, but also just, show off, how these Mac OS EC2 instances work. So you can see I've got one in my account at the moment. I've got a dedicated host for this. So what you usually do is you go to the EC2 section of your console, you launch a dedicated host. That dedicated host is what you can then launch different EC2 instances on effectively for like different build servers that you might have. It's a one-to-one for Mac Minis at the moment. So when I launch a new EC2 with a particular version of macOS on it, it's going to install one-to-one onto this host that I've secured. And, over time, that might become more flexible. One of the other things is Apple have a fairly strict EULA at the moment to make sure that people don't run these like temporarily for a minute or two and then like shut them down. So that's kind of why we've got this dedicated host. It has to run for 24 hours. So like if I try and delete it at the moment, I set this up like an hour or two ago. So if I release the host, you can see that at the moment, like I need it running on my AWS account for about 24 hours before I can clear it. So these would be permanent build servers. There wouldn't be anything ephemeral, effectively. And feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'm just going to make sure I can see the comments view as well. But in this host ID, basically you can see like the CPUs that the host has. So you can see the physical cores, the virtual CPUs here. You can place it in a particular region if you want. And you can see the type, which is probably the most important thing, is that it's Mac 1 Metal. So this is a Intel-based Mac that we have on AWS. And yeah, so this is kind of like the view of dedicated hosts. And if you were to do it yourself, you'd run through the same settings, but you just choose your instance type to be Mac. So it's very similar to if you've set up dedicated hosts beforehand. It recently came out with Sydney support, which is probably why I've been playing around with it a little bit more. So you can actually launch these instances in Sydney, but all the work that I've done in the past year has been in Ohio, so I'm going to stick with that particular region. And what I might do is I might show you the process through command line to get all this up and running, because if we're going to do a build server, we probably don't want to work through the UI most of the time, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll stop sharing this screen and I'll bring up iTerm. Here we go. So I can see that it's launched here. And what I want to do is, like, if I was to execute the same command and set up a dedicated host from scratch again, basically the line would be, let me find it in my notes because I've documented this. Basically this, right? So AWS EC2 allocate hosts, and then you choose your availability zone. You choose whether you want auto placement on, and I've chosen to have that on. So it's going to sort out like where this instance is going to be placed for me within that AZ. I've turned off host recovery, which is a step that we needed to do to get macOS build servers working. You can set your quantity. So, I've set 1, but I think you're allowed up to 4 by default before you need to ask for a service limit increase. Don't quote me on that, but that's based off of my memory from a while back. And then you've got your instance type, and then you've got your region as well. So that's effectively like what I ran just beforehand, right? If I do that again, it will set up another host for me. So you can see it returns this array with this new host. And if I was to go back to the console, I'd see it. I'll go back to the console in a little bit and run through everything that was done. But I'll show you how this command worked in about 5 minutes or so when we get to that step. So once you've created your dedicated host, the next thing that you need to do is you need to create a security group. And so to do that, like I'd do AWS EC2 create security group, and then you give your security group a name. So I'm just going to call mine MySGO1. And You can give it a description and you pick the region again. Now, you don't have to pick the region each time that you run these commands. If you're familiar with AWS CLI, you can pick a particular region that you're going to build everything in. But I usually work out of Sydney. So that's why I'm changing it to Ohio each time in these calls. So that will create a security group within my account, and I can see the group ID here. I might snatch that group ID because I'm going to need it in the next step, right? The next step is effectively, I want to do a curl, and I want to go to this URL, which is checkip.amazonaws.com. And so this gives me back my current IP that I've got. So this should be my address here. And what I want to do then is I effectively want to run another command. I've just copy pasted that security group from before up here, so you can see that ID is there. And then what I want to do at the end of this command is I want to set the security group up so only my local IP can access it, right? So I'm going to grab these characters here, and then I'm just going to do a /32. So hopefully this works. And it looks like it did. I'll just check in the background that everything's set up in my account. So bear with me for 2 seconds. Feel free to ask questions as we go. And hey, Derek, how's it going?
So here you've opened port 22, and I'm sure this question will come later, if not from the audience, but it will for me. If we want to connect to the console to this, we'll need the different port, which is the port that VNC runs on, right?
Yeah, that's right. I've opened 22 in particular just because I'm going to SSH into the instance and do a bunch of stuff. If we wanted to play with VNC, if we have time, we'll open up the VNC port that's needed as well. So just checking my security group. And yeah, I can see that all looks good in the console end. I'll show everyone the console in a second. Now, once we've done that, the next thing that we actually need to do is we need to run a command to create an EC2 instance. And so this one we're going to go over in a little bit of detail. So this is a little bit more complicated than the other commands that we've run. This is it here. So basically I use the run instances command. And this is going to set up a new EC2 instance for me. I'm setting the region again because I'm doing this all from Ohio. It's going to be on top of my dedicated host. Now, I actually don't need to say anything about my dedicated host. Like, this is all kind of magic that works for me, right? I just go, I want an instance of this type, and AWS is going to go in the background and it's going to find a dedicated host for me that kind of suits, and will give me an error if it can't. Now, the image ID is going to be for a particular version of macOS. So this will be Big Sur or something, whatever the second latest is that didn't come out last week. And so I've basically looked up this AMI within the console, and I've grabbed that AMI ID, and that's what I'm using here. But this could be a baked AMI that you might build on top of our AMIs as an organization. So you might have like a whole bunch of apps that you install. You could create your own ARMY image if you want to. And then the next thing is that you need, and I'm going to have to change this up the top, but you need your SSH key entered in here as well. So let me just look up ARMY or AMI. I know, right? It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be ARMY, but I say AMI.
Yeah, it is 100% supposed to be ARMY, but you'll catch me say AMI all the time, right? So, but I know that's a religious war over in some places. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's the Australian in me comes out with it every single time I look at it. It just looks like AMI to me, right? So maybe it's an Australian thing, but I get pulled up at work as well. It's like, no, Matt, it's ARMY. It's definitely 100% ARMY, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I know. But I'm also half Kiwi, right? So I say like a whole bunch of stuff weirdly. So half the time my New Zealand way of saying something comes out, and the other half the Australian way comes out.
Is that why you say copy pasta?
Copy pasta, yeah, or fridge, fish and chips.
Or AMI, yeah. Maybe we should just say
AMI. Yeah, you could say AMI as well. It's totally acceptable. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just going to go and create a new key pair. So I'm just doing this in the background. Let's call it Mac calls testing.
Once you've done that key pair, Matt, make sure you go over the volume size, because I'm pretty sure the first time you set this up, the default volume size was quite small.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what I've got to basically do next. Let me... Just going to check if that downloaded. Okay, cool. I've got it. It always tricks me. It's like, did I create it? It auto downloads on my computer. I've just set that up. So the key pair is on my machine. And let me make sure that I get the name right. So it is testing. And so I've got my key name entered so I can SSH into it, right? And I want a public IP address at the moment because I'm going to basically access this over the internet. But if I didn't want to do that, I'd leave that off. In terms of placement, here we go. So I'm saying it's a tenancy as a host, and the availability zone is 2B within Ohio. And then I've got that security group that I just used before and I created before. I've just reinserted that here. And the most important setting was actually this block device mappings. So what I want to do is, I think the instance comes out to be 20 gigabytes when you create it. So if you don't have this EBS volume attached at 120 gigs, it'll go ahead and it'll create like a 20 gig EBS volume. And then what you're going to have to do afterwards is you're going to have to resize it, because Xcode itself can be 30 gigs unpacked. Sometimes I've even seen up to like 50 or 60 gigs, but you also need space for Mac OS itself too. So there is another thing that I'll have to do later on to basically like make sure that I can take full use of that volume. So I'm going to actually have to do a resize once I've got my instance up and running. So that does take a little bit of time. But like the instance will still show a very small size when I check it out later once it's launched. And so I'll have to basically just do a resize volume in the console or by command line to make sure that I can take full usage of that space, which can take a little bit.
That setting reminds me of if anyone's uses Cloud9. Cloud9 like comes out of space. I know like so many times that we've chatted to the team. A couple of customers have asked for it as well, but the first thing that I do whenever I use Cloud9 is resize that volume for an extra 10 or 20 gig.
Yep. And I think by memory, if I do the volume size, like EBS is going to allocate the right space, and I just need to run a command on macOS to basically like resize the volume to take advantage of that. But if I don't attach this command here, I think it's about a half-hour wait. For some reason, macOS EC2 resizes are very, very slow when it comes to EBS. And so it takes a very long time to do that resize. It might have actually been an hour last time I did it. So that's kind of why I always run that last command to make sure the volume size is right from the get-go. So I'll run this command. And you can see the instance is in a disabled state. Is that the right instance? Yeah. So it's going to take a little bit to spin up, right? But what I might do, state pending, so you can see all the stuff. What I might do is I might use a particular command to keep checking. So this will change status in about like 2 or 3 minutes, right? So the EC2 instance doesn't take too long to launch. So it's still in a pending state. Take a little while to get up. What I can do is I'll flip to the console and I'll show you how I've set things up, or what those commands have effectively generated in the console. So I'm going to get my screen up and shared. So here we go. I'm back in the EC2 console. So when I ran that command before, like what I'd expect to see is a second dedicated host come up and running. So I can see the second one was created. So the first one I set up like manually in the console earlier today. and then just to show it off at the start. And then the one that I've just set up over command line now, you can see is set up, and all 12 of those CPUs have been assigned. That's effectively because I've got an EC2 instance that's now connected to this volume, right? To this dedicated host. So that's going to be, I can see that through the EC2 console if I go to instances. And so I can see that I have this new Mac 1 Metal instance running, and I can see the instance ID. So if I want to make sure that that security group came across that I set up as well, I'll go into security, and I can see that I have the security group that's attached. So that's the one that I created with my SG01 as the name. So that's come across well. And then like allowing port access by 22, I can see that the source IP that I set beforehand is all good here as well. So only my PC should be able to access this, and hopefully my IP doesn't change as we do testing. But if so, I'll make sure to keep it up to date. I think my IP rotates like about once daily, if I remember correctly. So yeah, so I have that instance. It looks like it's up and running. I did that all through the command line, and you can see it in the console now. If I go back to the command line, so I'll stop sharing again and I'll jump Windows. And for those that have joined late, this is really getting, this is about getting like iOS build servers happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check to see with that command if things look like they've launched again. So let's see.
The state was still pending.
Yeah, the state's still pending. Maybe it's doing a few things. Yeah, I can actually see in the console that it's initializing, right? So might need to give it a little bit more time. So we'll just give it a little bit more. And I'll hover around the console and then refresh when I see the console update as well. So you can see that, that state change. Have we got any questions from the audience so far?
I wonder how many people have gone through having to build and build the IPAs for iOS devices. Like it's always a pain. It's always a laptop somewhere sitting there doing it, and it's. I mean, look, I've done it, but not on a professional level or not on a large scale level. So a lot of that was written down instructions rather than like automated instructions. So you could go through it a couple of times, but it was really difficult to be able to like reproduce it a second time, or if someone else had to take over, it was very difficult. Set up all the certificates. I think when you started playing with this, Matt, that was one of the objectives here, to have basically the whole build and everything to run without needing any sort of GUI access at all. So the whole thing runs end to end without a GUI.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so that way people can set these up and then kind of like set and forget, right? They can link it to their CLI. They can have CLI run similar commands. They can execute Fastlane to do the builds. They can do tests this way. They can publish to the App Store if they wanted to. But they could effectively control, like once the code's left the developer's laptop, they can control like the build steps, the test steps, the release steps, and all of that through CI/CD, which is really, really nice. Developers can get alert whether the build worked or not. They could tie it into Device Farm, test across multiple devices as well. And so it just makes you know, your life as a developer a little more easy, I'd say, and you don't have to like bloat your laptop with a whole bunch of stuff running in the background that you have to wait on. You can get back to kind of like working on the next section of the app that you're looking to develop, or fixing bugs or whatever else it is. But you can also get back like data from, you know, multiple devices through Device Farm to say, hey, you know, this broke. You know, you've got an issue on like a smaller screen size on like an iPhone 6, but it all works well on a 12. And then you can look into like why that might have been the case and get it fixed again. So yeah, this generally used to be a pain. Like I used to, back in the day when I was developing, I used to have about, you know, 10 devices on my desk that I had to constantly have charged. And I'd have to test like all those devices one by one by plugging them into USB, because there wasn't even an option back in the day to connect to these devices over Wi-Fi. So it was fairly manual, and like I could spend like, I could write like 30 minutes worth of code, but spend 2 hours waiting on my laptop to run all these tests across all these different physical devices that I had, because the emulator didn't cut it for certain scenarios when you wanted the GPS, or you wanted to just make sure that the hardware in the OS is going to run consistent. Like, there's a reason why they call it the iOS simulator. It's not a full emulator. In terms of like emulating a device, it's simulating a device. And so you do find a lot of discrepancies between the local tests that you do with that software simulator and like how it actually works on a real device.
Plus, it's slow. Like, it slows your computer down. It's actually slow to work with.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be like 2 hours, and I couldn't do anything. Like while the tests were running, like, and the builds were running, like, I couldn't even open Spotify in the background if I wanted to, or open a text editor. I posted that link
to the XKCD comic of compiling. Everybody knows that. It actually reminds me of one of my first jobs as a programmer. We had a C++ app, and I remember then I had a Pentium 3 that was like, I think it was like 1.2 gigahertz. I had 512 megs of RAM, and compile that app would take like 30 minutes, and I couldn't even move the mouse when I was compiling. So I spent a lot of time sitting there just doing nothing, or catching up, having coffees through our build cycle, trying to get that thing running, and spent a lot of time compiling there. Yeah. How's that looking, Matt? Is it still pending?
It looks like it's ready. I'm just trying to find in the CLI where I can see the state. Still pending. Why is that? That's interesting.
Maybe give it a go. Try SSH to it.
Yeah, I'm going to do that now, right? So let's see if we can get onto this machine. So
does anybody in the audience know, just quickly, the quickest one to answer, what numbers you need to do when you need to chmod it, your PEM? Because did you do that, Matt, or is it too open?
I could do that if I felt like doing it.
Who knows that? Maybe because we got some swag.
We might as well, right? So
we can do our first prize, I guess.
Yep. So I'm going to strip this off, right? And I'm going to go chmod.
Oh, yeah, okay, yep.
What do we get?
It's definitely not 777.
777 is completely open, right? Like,
I think when you download it, it's like 600 or something.
Yep. So the first one's a 4.
Maybe we'll advertise the prize for next week, because if we don't have a winner, we can't give out a prize. That's okay.
That's okay. Well, for the sake of doing it, I've done it.
Yeah, we'll have another challenge another time for anybody interested. But Matt and I have been talking about getting some swag. So I do have some early swag, our first lot. And we want to have a couple of giveaways and maybe some questions week by week. But what we'd also really like is, and we are getting like some guests contacting us to come on the show. But if anyone's got anything like really interesting, like, go ahead and reach out to us on probably LinkedIn. We're getting a form set up where we can collect all your details and you can engage with us directly. But reach out to us on LinkedIn or LinkedIn, or we'll provide our email addresses or something. But yeah, if anyone's got anything interesting they want to like dive into or show us or work through with us on the show, go ahead and do that, and we'll have a bit of a swag pack for those people as well.
Excellent. So let's see if SSH works. I've just grabbed the SSH command from the console, right? So I navigated to my downloads because that's where I've got the PEM file at the moment. And then I've got my EC2 user is the username, and then I've got the instance followed. So let's see if this works. It looks like it is. And so no one else should be able to hit this up, right? Like this should only be accessed by my IP at the moment. I do want to continue connecting and approve that fingerprinting. So I'll say yes. And there we go. So it looks like I'm now on macOS EC2. So Big Sur. I quite like the little image that they've got, right? Like they've got the little Mac Finder logo and then next to words EC2 there. So that's pretty cute. I've seen some people that have completely modded this up, and they've got like the original rainbow-colored Apple logo, and they've really personalized their macOS EC2 instances, which is pretty cute. Now, what I want to do, right? So if I was to automate like a build here, the first thing that I do need to do is I need to actually install Xcode. And normally I would run a command like this, right? Like Xcode select and then -- install. But I don't want to do that this time. And the reason why I don't want to do that is because if I do it this route, I'm not going to be able to put in the details that are needed to effectively install this. Like part of the installation process requires the UI. And because I'm doing everything through the console, I decided to use this gem package, which was pretty cool. So it was a Ruby gem package called Xcode install. And then what I did was to automate the process of like picking the Xcode version and doing it all through command line is I used XC version. And then I went install and then 13, right? So 13 is the latest version of Xcode. I think 13.1 is now out. But the cool thing about XC version install is I can go back to 12 or 11 and I can have multiple instances of Xcode installed on my machine. So I can test the app across older versions of Xcode. That's really good, like when it comes to the developer preview coming out once a year and you kind of want to use the new features. Like this year it was all around having async available in Swift. But then I can roll back to 12, which didn't have support for that alongside Swift. And I can go back to working on my main app that I can't really change until users have downloaded a version of iOS that kind of supports that end to end. Although I did see really cool, like this week, it does look like async will work across devices on major versions from 2 or 3 years ago, which is nice. So anyways, I'll run this command and it's going to prompt me for my Apple ID, password, and 2-factor token as well. So that's just because I am going through and setting it up with my individual developer account, but I could have a service account that I've made with an enterprise. I could have a service account that I've made with an enterprise instance of Xcode and developer.apple. You can make enterprise accounts there. And then you can use that service account to log in, and then you could have a shared key or a shared secret that makes it a lot easier. That was one of the newer features I think that they released, a year back or so, when they were making the tools a lot easier for developers, and they don't have to rely on their personal account being tied to their work account, or set up a work email and then use the developer portal for work with those details for their apps. You could have the shared service account that will work on build servers, so you don't have to kind of have that accountability if you set up the build server that you control. If you reset your Apple ID, it bumps, I guess, the builds. So this is going to take a little bit. And this is like a blast from the past for me, right? Because I haven't done, I kind of do a lot of app development on the side, but I haven't really had to set up a build server for 5 years now, right? So I will put in my details here. And password. And then now my PC has actually prompted me, and my iPhone and every other device has prompted me to approve this particular EC2 instance, right? So I'm going to put in the 6-digit code. That's sent by Apple. And using this, I'll be able to have Xcode configured, but also Xcode pulled down from the Apple developer website or the App Store, or wherever I get it from. I'm able to pull that down, and I can use my login details for that, right? And again, I believe they support service accounts now, so you can do this in a lot cleaner way with a certificate and a service account ID, but I haven't tried that method myself. But it worked fairly similarly, and I can see in the Fastlane documentation and XC version documentation that it's all supported too. So this does take a while, right? Like if I remember, Xcode is like 30 gigs unpacked, but it's got to download 10 gigabytes. So it's actually doing a lot of work in the background. And then once it's downloaded that 10 gigs, it's then got to unzip that and then place it within the applications directory on the build server.
Matt, at the same time, are we able to enable VNC? Or let's stop. I think you can open a second terminal and turn VNC on, right?
Yeah, I could do that. That shouldn't affect the session at all, right? Let me see. What is the VNC port?
5900.
Yeah, 5900.
On I'll just say that there's an AWS workshop around this. And so the easier way, what Matt will do is open port 5900. But what you can do is put a SSH tunnel and just tunnel over SSH to connect in if you need to. That's probably a better way to go ahead and restrict access. So at least that's fully encrypted all the way through. I'm pretty sure 5900, that VNC is not an encrypted channel. But it'll work for today.
Yeah, and I am locking it to my IP address anyway, right? So it's kind of half okay, I guess. Just getting my IP address again. Okay, and -32. I'll share this in a second with everyone, so you can see what I've done in the security group. And if I remember as well, like, what was the tool to VNC, right? I never do it on Mac. There was a particular application I might need to download, like VNC Viewer, or is there?
I don't think it's already installed on the Mac, I think.
It's a remote desktop. Let me look in the utilities folder. Let's see if I can find it.
Screen share or screen view or something. Screen sharing.
Screen sharing. Don't think I have it.
Beastie Berry's got a good question for you, Matt. Is there an AMI installed, AMI, with all the Xcode software already installed?
Not yet, no. So at the moment, you'll have to install Xcode yourselves. I think part of that is because, like, as you do the install, you need to either pull it from your developer account or the App Store, and so Apple kind of want it linked to an organization or a service account or an end user. So I think that's why we don't have it pre-baked. But what you can do is you could do this once, right? And then you could bake this as your own AMI army or whatever. And then you can every time you need a new build server, you can use that army, right? The only issue there is that you've got to keep it up to date, right? So as new security patches come out, new versions of Xcode, you'd have to then do those updates and rebake as well. So it can be a bit of a pain. But I do hope that eventually, like, we'll be allowed to have Xcode, but I don't think we're allowed to at the moment.
So did you recreate or alter that security group to add that extra port?
Yeah, I've done that now. I can't find default VNC viewer in Mac, right? So I just went to
screen sharing.
I don't have it.
What? I thought it's with every Mac.
Yeah, I haven't checked in the utilities folder. I've done a search. I can't find it.
Just do it with like command space screen sharing. I'm pretty sure it's there.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Oh, that's weird. I don't know.
Wait, here we go. That's weird. Okay, so while we wait for this, actually, has it finished? No, I've got the disk error. That's exactly why. Yeah, that's okay. So this is kind of what I was expecting, but I have to do a step beforehand, right? What I need to do here is I actually need to increase the volume size before I run this command. So I'll go back to sharing very quickly. Let's bring out my browser. So like I need to basically run through these extra commands and then do a resize of my hard drive. And then that way there'll be enough room to unzip Xcode once it's downloaded. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. Like I've allocated 120 gig volume, but macOS isn't using that space until I effectively increase the disk size. So this is kind of what caught me the first time that I tried doing a build server. So I'll go back to terminal. And what we'll do is we'll get Xcode working and unzipped, and then we'll kind of look at the VNC aspect of it. So I can run this command as per the article, and I'll paste that article in if everyone's interested in kind of reading along as well. And what I can see here is, so I've got the 64 gig volume, but I'm not taking full usage of the 120 gigs that I set, right?
Just try run it and see how much space it tells you is available.
So I think all that I do is I just run these extra two commands that I've got. It's a little bit different. So this is all through the blog. And so once this is done, I should be able to run that disk util command, and I'll be able to see that I've got the full size available again.
Yeah, I think if you run df before you had have done that, you would have seen that you won't have all that available space. You'd be close. So once this happens, yeah, we should be okay. Did this take a long time the first time we did it? Pretty quick.
No, it's a very long time if you need to resize your EBS volume. Yeah, here we go. So like I ran that at the start, right? And
it was 60
what I
gigs.
could see was it was 60 gigs. Now I've got full use of the 128, right? So that resize command seemed to have worked. And what I can do is I can go back and install Xcode 13. Like I'm pretty sure that first command would have worked. So I'll just go back and install 13. And I'll need to enter in all my details again. I could save these in Fastlane, and then I don't need to enter them each time, right? So there's kind of a way to make this a lot faster, longer term, but for the sake of a demo, I'll do this. It's probably going to ask, nope, I didn't need my two-factor again, so it'll retrust the machine. Yeah, so this will zap along. Oh, maybe not.
I think it was working, Matt.
Was it? Let me just double check.
It was just resting.
I was always impatient.
Yeah, that's okay. It doesn't store that password in the keychain. Just leave it.
Yeah, I do get that error. Like, so that's fine. I thought I saw a different error. Maybe I was just panicking.
I think you were just impatient.
Yeah, probably.
While that's happening, start the Vnc server.
Yeah, so what I've done is I'll go back to my browser very quickly. Here we go. And so all that I did was I went into my security groups. I can do this from the EC2 dashboard as well, right? Like I've got this Mac OS instance running. I can go security, and like what I've done is I've added like a new inbound rule, right? So the security group allows connection from port 5900. I might actually go to it. So I think I'm missing, now I'm missing 22 for SSH, right? It's probably still let me in because I've got that session. But I need to go 202.153.220.27/32.
Yeah, that's weird. How did you accidentally change it?
I must have accidentally changed it, but it still let me do things in the terminal, like because I'm already connected, right? So yep, so I've got 5900 there, and then let's have a look at this tool. I'm going to need to get my external URL for the instance. So this is what I'm going to need. So I'll just copy that, and then I'll get that tool open. And yep, so screen sharing, I paste the connect to in there. Yeah, that's right.
Don't you have to enable it? You have to SSH in and enable it.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to do that right now. There's going to be a command that I'm going to need.
I pasted that command in the private chat.
Cool. I was just having a quick Google.
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, like VNC is built into Mac OS, so you can turn that on automatically, whether that's at home and port forward over the internet or just from one machine to another. You can connect. You don't need to install anything extra.
So I'm just running that command here.
That's halfway through a process though, Matt. You need to open a new session.
Yeah. Let me open a fresh one. And I'll grab that command.
Or was it halfway through a session? Because it kind of didn't look like it was working. Well, anyway, we'll come back to that in a sec.
Yeah, I thought the session had ended. Have a look. It's because it broke up resources.
Oh, that's weird.
Cool. So I'm guessing it's going to work, right?
I mean, it should.
So I'll go back.
Yeah, Beast Berry, it's raining at my house. I keep forgetting to mute myself.
So it doesn't look like it's worked. I'm just going to run a Kickstart activate in terminal. I've got the rain now, actually.
Are you sure you edited the correct security group? Like, are you sure that's the correct security of that instance and that it's not port port isn't closed.
I will double check in the console now. Yeah, 5900 over TCP and then 22 over TCP. So that's all correct. And that's attached to the instance, right? Can just try.
There's an extra command. There's an extra command. Go ahead and run that one because I think this comes from a more recent post.
Okay. Back to corresponding value.
Yeah, we'll need to paste that in the terminal.
No, it didn't work. I was trying to quick paste the IP address, but I ran that command. It didn't work, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's have a look.
Yes. Stu, just double check that you're copying and pasting the whole fully qualified domain name. Like, is it not connecting that one? Okay, this looks better now.
Yeah, I found a new command line, right? So this looks much better. And yes, so what I can see is it now works, right? And now it's asking for a username and password. So I think this was the one other step that I remember, right? Like I probably need to set, if we were to do VNC properly, right? This is a bit of a detour VNC, right? So you don't have to do this for build servers. But like the username is going to be EC2 user, right?
But the password isn't set, I don't think, is there?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually have to set that password via a command line.
So not everybody has access to this, but there isn't, and that's probably why we haven't seen too much content about how to go through it. It's sort of broken up. But I think this would be good content for our blog post to put it up, all the little steps that you need to go through, because it's a bit of a pain going backwards and forwards trying to figure out what's going on. And once you can do it manually, then you go ahead and automate all of those steps as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And I guess, like, realistically, you probably don't want VNC access. That's something that you want to. If you've got some problem, you need to break glass. Sure, you can connect into it, but realistically, you probably never even need to connect to the GUI.
Well, you don't want to connect to the GUI, right? You want CI/CD to do this, like, ultimately, right? This would be a complete glass break moment.
Break glass or grass break?
Grass break. I can't even speak today, right? Army, grass break. Now I can't even say glass break. Okay, cool. So trying to find that command. So it says it should just be reset password, but I'm not having that luxury of that working. Oh wow, the rain's very heavy. I wonder if anyone can hear that through the chat. So I'm doing in sudo pass wd and then ec2-user within my terminal. So that looks like that worked. So the command that I ran, if anyone's interested in, was just this one here. It's good it's not too loud. So let's see if I can get in now. And it actually did work. It looks like I entered the password wrong the first time. And let me jump to the window that we see, right? So this is what the Vnc looks like on the Mac Mini. So you can see the EC2 user. I type in that password again. It sounds scary with your screen is being observed, but that's basically because I'm VNCing into this, right? So it's just Mac letting me know that another user's connected, which is just myself, right? At the end of the day. But this is it. So this is macOS EC2. So I can scroll down the bottom. I can see it just looks like any other standard Mac, right? This is a Mac Mini behind the scenes. I've got my applications installed there, but Vnc fully works here. So I could, if I needed to absolutely break glass, I could, like download Xcode, fix a particular something where it needs like access through the UI. But Apple's done quite a bit of work to make sure that command line works these days in the majority, like on the latest versions of macOS. So each version over the last 2 years, they've kind of enhanced that. But yeah, there we have it. We've got VNC. I wouldn't recommend doing this for your build servers though, right? Like it's only that break glass moment. But yeah.
If you needed to work on it, obviously you're got fully around the world basically.
Yeah.
So if you have that closer, the latency would, it'd feel quicker, but plus you're streaming it as well. Because the works, like, you think about like what we do with workspaces. So I specifically use Linux workspace quite a lot for remote development, and I find it to be almost as close as working natively. Like it's so quick and so responsive to work in there. Whereas Windows is like, it's got that slight like half second delay or something like that, maybe less than half a millisecond. But the Mac should be like really fast as well. So the remote VNC client should be really, really fast.
Yeah, so that's pretty awesome, right? Now I'm just going to go back to my terminal and see how Xcode's looking, right? So I'll flip around again. Now all the steps that we've done today, like outside of enabling VNC, has been fully through the command line, right? So better optimized than VNC. Well, yeah, part of it is like I'm running this instance in Ohio, right? When I could be running it within Sydney. So it'd be a lot faster if I did that. I'm using the default VNC viewer in macOS, whereas I usually use real VNC, which is maybe a bit more optimized than the default one that comes with macOS here, but I didn't have it installed on my work computer. But also, like, it's raining and I've had internet problems all week. Like 5 minutes before the start of the stream, I dropped. They've been working on internet down the road for a couple of new neighbors. And so it's been up and down the last week, which is a bit annoying. But it is what it is. And yeah, so going back, I might close that session off.
It definitely looks like something is wrong there. Like something's got stuck halfway through.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I mean, it could be just downloading, still downloading in the background, but it seems to be gone for a long time.
Yeah, actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll open up another window and I'll see if Xcode's actually installed, right?
Beastleberry asked a question, Matt. Sorry, maybe I missed it, but is the instance on bare metal or is it still through a hypervisor?
It's a good question. So this is bare metal, right? Like this is running on a dedicated host at the end of the day, and it's a direct one-to-one fit for that dedicated host.
Yeah. So when you are running on when you are firing up and running that EC2, that Mac EC2 instance, nobody is sharing that underlying compute with you. It is for you and for you.
It's fully mine, dedicated host, bare metal. But there's some things like EPS and all that, like, you use the shared, the shared capacity of what we've got for EBS for volumes and attachments, and that's why we can resize things dynamically, right? Like, this is just the compute element that's bare metal. Maybe I'm overcomplicating things here.
Yeah, that's probably why it's like there is no super cheap option for this, because you are getting full access to that hardware. No one else can share or use that hardware at the same time. Maybe you need to do a cleanup or something.
What I might try and do is, if I can get the CLI right, select 13. Yes, it doesn't look like that has worked, right? So what I might do is I might kill this, and I might do a fresh install here, right? So let's go XC version cleanup, and XC version install 13. Re-kick this off again. User interaction is not allowed. I'm just wondering if it's from, maybe it's one or two things that I can think of, right?
Type the password in wrong or something?
No, what I'm thinking is, like, I did change the password for EC2 user, and it did recommend me do a reboot when I do that, and I haven't done that, so that might be one thing that I might need to do. But I'm just going to try it in the other terminal as well. And then pick up, like, what the latest version is. I think it's 1. So I'll kick that into gear. Yeah, okay. So what I'll do is I'll do a reboot of this, right? I'll just do that through the console, actually.
Sudo reboot. Sudo reboot.
Yeah, there we go. So that will take, like, maybe a minute to come back. So it won't take too long.
How's the rain at your place? Can people hear the rain here? It's starting to really come down. I'm going to get wet running inside.
It's bucketing, but it's still, like, pretty hot, right? Like, we had a very hot day yesterday, so I guess this is catching up for the heat and the sun yesterday. So I'll just wait for it to come up. This might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I thought so. I keep muting myself and going on and off.
Yeah, that's okay. Oh yeah, this is my Lambda benchmarks. Going through my history. We will have a really fun session about benchmarking ARM versus Intel Lambda at some point in the coming future. So that's one of the things that we're preparing for.
I got that Babblefish instance up and running. I was just gonna see if we have a sec. I can show that as well.
Yeah, that might be good. If I can kick off Xcode, that might fill the gap while we wait for Xcode to download and unzip, which can take a while, right?
All right.
Actually,
well,
we're over, aren't we? Shoot, I just looked at the time.
we're a little bit over. It's okay.
Yep.
There's nothing after us today. Do you want me to show that?
Let me see if I can reconnect in. Reboot's taking longer than I expected. Yeah, let me keep trying this in the background. I'll let you show off the Babblefish stuff. I think we might have to pick it up for another session because we do have to go in 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, I can quickly show that. You have a look in the background. I'll share my screen. I'll share my entire screen here so I can move around a little bit. Do you want to bring that up, Matt?
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say, disciple of Jesus, it does literally take half the day sometimes. I completely concur. That's why I'm thinking, like, I might get it kicked off, and then we might show once Xcode's downloaded, we'll show the second lot of steps to get it up and running. I have put it in GitHub, and I think it's a public repo as well, so I can share back with everyone here anyway if you want to have a look in the interim, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to show the Swift app that I built. You see, yeah, it is public, but my notes on how to do everything end to end is actually in this blog here. Go ahead, Paul. Your screen's up.
So I've gone ahead and created an Aurora Postgres database. So when you go ahead and create that, I'll show that really, really quickly. So if I was to go and create a new database, it's taking a long time. If I was to create a new database, I'll just show what that looks like. Yeah, here. So if I go create database, obviously you can do it through the CLI, but we'll choose Amazon Aurora. And you need to choose a Postgres compatible edition. So you go ahead and do that. Then you see like show filters, and we'll show the versions to support Babblefish. So you can have a look down here, all the versions, and we know that it'll be 13.4. But I'll just chuck that filter on so we can see it. There we go. The rest of it is the same that you would normally create. However, once you create the database, it's an Aurora Babblefish database. You also need to turn on Babblefish. That means that this RDS instance will listen on both port 5432 for Postgres, but also 1433 for SQL Server. So I've done that already, and I created that database right before we started, and that gives us a couple of different endpoints, a read and a write one. So I've got a write. I'll connect to this write instance here. I've gone ahead and used DataGrip to be able to do that, and I created a database on there. I'll quickly just show what that looks like here. If we go to where's the properties? Anyway, I'll just show. If we go new, it's on the connection. Well, just trust me, I've connected to 1433, not 5432. But that's a Postgres database, and what I'll do is I'll take this script that's been generated as part of the AWS blog, and we should be able to go ahead and start creating tables using like SQL Server dialect to be able to create any tables we want, interact with whatever we need to do. And we can see that that's gone ahead and created a whole bunch of tables. Maybe something's wrong because I did it twice here, but you can see that it will go ahead and create tables, interact as if this was a SQL Server database. But the interesting thing is you tend not to be able to do an explore. So you have to kind of know what databases you're using to be able to look through it. So like here it is, that's database name, is the database I'm connecting to, and that will have a bunch of different specific tables, but it can be difficult to like browse through those tables with the standard tools that you're looking at. But we've definitely created some of those tables, and I'll there's a script here that we can run to insert some data in there as well. So there's create objects. We'll do load data. I'll view the raw file. So I won't use that bike store. Take everything below that. So we should be able to go ahead and just populate up that database. It's like 10,000 lines, so it might take a minute or so, but we should start seeing all of that populate into that database. And I can see here that it is connecting and is going ahead and inserting all of those records in. We can see that this is running. But yeah, basically, like now I can, if I had an existing application or I was, very familiar with running on SQL Server, I wanted the performance that SQL Server gives, and I've got an existing code base, I can go ahead and build on top of this. So migrate my data across, maybe use DMS if I wanted to do that, or a different conversion tool. But now I'll be able to connect my application and treat my application as if the backend was SQL Server, but be using a Postgres or an RDS database. Some of the benefits of that include, your easy reader-writer endpoints, your ability to scale it up and down, and what at some point in time, like it'd be really nice to see whether they AWS or whether we are going to support serverless. So a serverless and auto-scaling version of SQL Server would be really handy as well. So yeah, I just thought that was one thing that was worth showing and seeing how easy that was to set up. Basically, it took me 5 times as long to create the database than it did to configure it and set it all up. It takes 5-6 minutes or so to create an Aura database. So I'll hand it to you, Matt.
Yeah, it's still coming up. I just tried a second ago, so I'm giving it one more attempt now. And if this doesn't work, I think what we'll do is we'll do a second part, all right? Because we actually both have a meeting 1:15, which is a very strange time. And it does look like it doesn't want to behave. So yeah, timed out again. So what we'll do is we'll pick this up next time. We'll do another session on it, and I'll get the Ec2 Instance set up so that everything's there to go. Xcode 13's pulled down, and that should probably only take like 15 or 20 minutes to run through what to do for an application, right? So definitely want to continue this, but we are out of time. The other thing is I did share a link to my GitHub repo. I'll just bring this back up on the screen. But this is just one of the projects that I use. I was playing around with language conversion from Japanese to English. So I've commented out that code. You can see it in an earlier commit when I wasn't playing around with Mac EC2. If you want to check out that side of the thing. So I think it was the 28th of April is what you'd want to have a look at if you want to play with some machine learning and Amplify. But what I've done is I've just documented those steps that we went through earlier today, right? So what's needed to set up the macOS EC2 instance. I realize they're a little bit pricey. So, you don't want to leave this running for too long, but you'd have to leave it running for 24 hours if you do follow along. And from there, I've got the commands that I use to effectively install Xcode, check the version, and then run the sample app that I've got without the Amplify components set up, just so I can quickly test. And I've got like a build for testing, doing an IPA for release, taking screenshots, and then I've got like doing a fastlane create, setting it up in Apple Developer Portal, and then I can do the upload command as well. So I've kind of set these things up to do a couple of basic things. Which is quite nice, but you can run through this in your own time and do this if you want to earlier. And then what we'll do is, at a later state, I'll make sure to have 20 minutes spare where we've gotten up to where we are today with another instance, and we go through and complete, doing this on macOS EC2. So that being said, Paul and I do have to scoot, so I'll say goodbye to everyone. Hopefully the session was good, even though the demo gods somewhat failed us today, as I can see Beastly Berries mentioned. And we'll catch you all next week, same time. Thanks, everyone.
Take care all.
Thanks. Bye.